We have the HME mechanic who does maintenance of equipment. They also do not require to take out permits, but they require to do what? To do isolation. So they use rocks and tags, but they don't require permits, not unless it's a special cases. So jobs that represent hazards to work groups, either by the operation or stored energy or direct energy such as electricity, they require permits. So these points carry almost the whole idea of the permit system. The others, we also look at jobs that require, or an equipment affected requires production. You'll be able to stop the production of an area. So if you need to stop work in a certain area, then you require to have a permit. You need to agree with those people in that area. Work involved is not within the employee's normal operational areas. So normal operational areas, we say they are what? Workshops. So anything that is outside the workshop, then it requires to have a permit. So we do not require permits for routine service, routine process duties, work on workshops, and exclusive inspections and testing. But in this case, we also reminded that if there are any jobs that are done on live equipment, we have electrical teams, they do testing on live equipment. There are procedures for that also that require to be adhered to. So these are the hard energy, the different types of energy sources that we need to protect ourselves from. So energized equipment, electricity, stored energy, we have examples like pressurized vessels, pipelines, amputated valves. Then we have mechanical energy, equipment or materials that can move by sudden movement. We have incorrect stacking. So then we have things like gases, displacement of oxygen in confined spaces, explosive tanks. So we have examples like flash and shock hazards. We have fuel tank explosions. We have engulfment, trenches. So then we have our lockout and tagout systems. So before we get to the locks and tags, I'm sure we've been using them and we know how to use them. Then we have the possibilities. So I want us to first go through a video that will take us through the learning moment on permitting and how we should always consider, what we should consider when taking out permits, the requirements for permits.
A permit to work is vital to make your job safe. Ignoring it can be extremely dangerous and can lead to death and serious injury. Front of the A permit to work is vital to make your job safe. Ignoring it can be extremely dangerous and can lead to death and serious injury. This is the BP Cupiagua field in Colombia in South America. Pablo Guerrero, Linares Moreno, and Oscar Gomez were helping to build a roadway to a new flow line connecting the well pad to the Cupiagua Central Processing Facility. High voltage cables passed over the track at a height of about 8 meters. And the three of them had been asked to erect a goalpost sign over the road in front of the cables to warn construction traffic of the danger. Their permit had been signed by the engineer, but he hadn't visited the site. Instead, the engineer relied on the advice of a supervisor who assessed all risks as low. The supervisor left before the job started, handing over to Pablo.
Let's get everything clear. So the permit was issued by who? An engineer who never visited site. The supervisor who prepared the JSA identified all the risks as low. No. So, and he did not even take his time to stay here, so he delegated his duties to another person. So,
but there was a disagreement between them about where the sign should be positioned. In the end, Pablo insisted it was placed half a meter in front of the cables. It was a fatal decision. Linares fetched the first 10-meter long upright, while Oscar and Pablo dug a hole about a meter deep to put it in.
Dale con más fuerza.
It had touched the high voltage cable and he was unable to move until Oscar ran at him and pushed him away, freeing his grip on the pole. Pablo fell to the ground. He died from the electric shock. Permits can only provide safety if they're completed correctly, based on a good local assessment of the risks and agreement on the measures needed to control them. The Golden Rule says you must have a permit to work whenever abnormal or high-risk work is to be carried out, or where specific circumstances require protection above that which normal working conditions provide. And specifically, a permit must exist before you start work which involves confined space entry, or working on energy systems. You must have a permit before starting work involving ground disturbance where buried hazards may exist, and hot work in potentially explosive environments. The permit must define the scope of the work. It must identify hazards and assess risk. And it must establish control measures to eliminate or mitigate those hazards. The permit must link the work to other associated work permits or simultaneous operations. It must be authorized by the responsible person. And then everyone involved in the work must have the contents of the permit communicated to them. When the job is over, the permit must ensure adequate control over the return to normal operations. The permit provides written confirmation that a risk assessment of the specific conditions affecting the work has been carried out, and that appropriate control measures to protect personnel and equipment from each of the hazards have been provided. The permit is a formal agreement between you and the permit authority or responsible person that the risks and the controls to mitigate those risks are understood and will be fully implemented. Sign the permit only when you're happy that you understand all the requirements. The permit to work system at Cupiagua was revised and strengthened, and training was carried out to make sure it was fully understood. Managers have been encouraged to review the system in operation during their regular ASA tours. The Golden Rule helps everyone to understand how important the controls specified in a permit are for their own safety. Don't start work if you don't understand, or if you think that the job is still unsafe. If it's unsafe, stop work.
So, That is something that happened. And what we've just seen is an example of what happened, but it actually happened. And this is just one of the many things that have been happening. We saw, I think 2 months down the line in Nakuru, the Kenya KPLC guys who died. Because of what? The simple reason they say was miscommunication. KPLC is a very old company in Kenya. Most of us have been born and it was still operational. So we expect such a company to have very stringent measures that have been put in place to protect people. But all in all, if the measures are there, people should be empowered. And the reason for such doing this refresher training is to remind people that you have a responsibility. You have to remember your safety every time before you do a task. Complacency can kill, and it does kill. So taking shortcuts or thinking, it's just 5 minutes, you do the job. You're fixing this, you decide, inamwaga maji, because most of the time was inamwaga maji, especially in the hot season. So you just unplug there, unakimbia kule nyuma, unafanya nini. Then somebody comes in, Michael comes in, and maybe I have not heard anything, because si kila mtu hapa base anafikiria mambo ya permit na nini. Anakuja anafanya nini? Anarudisha anafanya nini? Na kazi na yeye anataka shughuli yake, mkutano wake uendelee. Because for example, mtu wa social, wale ndio watu wenye huwa ni special hapa base, wao huwa hawashughuliki na hizo mambo za safety ama hizo za training nyingi. So you bring somebody here, amezoea kwa field kule, na they need to do a meeting here, maybe the community there is a conflict. Wao watafanya nini? Just come in and plug it back. Wewe uko kule nje, labda tutasikia tu umewika, then that may be the end of you, or maybe you might lose some part of the body, which is very risky. So we have to do things right. Let's do things right. Let's stop taking shortcuts. Let's prepare appropriate documents before we do any job. So on locks and tags, we are looking at just the different types of isolations that we do here. So I have a description of those pictures. On single point and multiple isolations. On multiple, we use blue locks. For single point isolations, we use only 2 locks. That is a red and a yellow lock, and we isolate from one single point. And multiple isolations, we do more than one isolation, where we have the blue locks, they come in a bunch of 10 locks, and you're able to use them one key. And that's why we use lock boxes. We are able to protect ourselves when doing the job. So, and we have different responsibilities under the permit to work. The same thing I talked about the different persons. The same people have different responsibilities. So we have the permit requester, who is also a job supervisor. It can be a worker, a permit recipient, a permit holder. This person has the responsibility to ensure that they oversee the work in progress and ensure that conditions of that permit are met, and it's not mandatory that they do the job. So they don't have to do the job physically, they can oversee the job happening. So they can take out one or more permits or JSAs or permits to make sure that certain tasks are happening. So we always say preferably a supervisor in either mechanical or E&I, but I've said preferably, it's not a must. Then we have workers. These are the people who do the job, physically perform the task, so for which the permit is requested. These are the people who are at risk of getting what? Injured. So and that's why I insisted, if you are a worker, ensure that you understand from the JSA, ensure that it is indicated on the permit before you sign on that permit. You understand what is required for that job. So they use red locks, and they place them on a single point isolation point or on lock boxes to secure the blue lock keys. So those are the workers. They must ensure they sign off the master installation permit and remove their locks once the work is completed. So always remove your lock. That is the requirement. Then we have isolators. These are persons designated and authorized to isolate sources of energy, equipment, and make them safe by releasing any stored energy. The permit requester must witness the isolation of the isolator if the isolator is a permit authorizer. So in the case of single point, the permit requester has to witness. In the case of multiple isolations, the authorizer is responsible to oversee the isolations that are being done. So we do two types of isolations. I think we've talked about this. We do single point isolation and multiple isolations. So in multiple isolation, we use blue locks for isolating the points, and red and yellow locks there. We put them on the lock boxes to secure the blue lock keys. Then we have the authorizer. The authorizer is the person delegated to review the JSA presented by the permit requester and ensure that all equipment that requires isolation has been identified according to the isolation matrix, plan, and isolation procedures. Then with input from the permit requester and a completed JSA complete the permit work and a master isolation permit sections of the permit to ensure all foreseeable safety precautions have been taken. Perform witness or check isolations done by the isolator against the master isolation permit and authorize the work permit to work once satisfied it is safe to do work. So as we say, the last thing that an authorizer does is to authorize the job. So you can issue as many permits, but the authorization now depends on the requirements, whether the requirements have done what have been met. So I was issuing you a safe work permit, before I authorized, we identified that you require to have a hot work permit, a confined permit. Then, before I authorize you, I have to see what? Those permits attached. I have to witness, ensure that isolations have been done properly. So, and also he has the task to ensure that effective handover between shifts take place, monitor work to ensure compliance with the permit work. So it's very important. They have to do that. That is the authorizer. He has the overall authority to ensure that everything is safe before authorizing the job. Then we have the location of the lock boxes. This one now depends on the type of isolation. So if it's a single point isolation, the person doing the document part is kept by the permit requester at the job site for review by any safety or management representative. So, and the documents, the following documents make up document part 4, the lockout tagout systems, that is the job safety analysis, original white page for master isolation permit, original white page for other permits, hot work or confined space applicable for. So which copy goes to the field? The blue copies, you know? Yeah. That's the one we take to the field when we're doing the job. The other copies remain with at the permit desk. So multiple isolation document pack is kept by the permit requester at the job site for review by safety or management. Softbox is kept by permit. So in this case, we have our permit desk where everything is monitored from that point. The only copy that we take to the field is a blue copy, and the JSA to ensure that it can be reviewed from that point. On completion of work, we also we are required to ensure that that the equipment is safe to start, either safe or redundant. So we either tag it out or we make sure that everything housekeeping has been done, safety guardings have been put in place, tools and equipment have been removed and kept where they're supposed to. Requester and workers then sign off the master isolation permits and the permit to work. Then we are ready to remove our locks. So out of service tags, again, we use them to tag out equipment that are not safe, or the equipment that are redundant, which require waiting for spares and or they are faulty in any way. That's when we use an out of service tag. So when we remove locks, so we always advise that you cannot remove another person's lock. So locks are only removed by those people who placed them, and either at the completion of work or any time that you need to move to another area to do the job. So these are red locks. So personal locks. So you cannot remove another person's danger tag or isolation lock. That is not allowed. So change of work teams, again, when we have the change of work teams, also we have to ensure that proper handover, that is the authorizer, has to ensure proper handover happens. So incoming authorizer must check and verify isolation equipment as per master isolation permit by means of a physical check of locks in the field, testing for lines by the control room. So incoming requesters and workers must sign on the original master isolation permit and sections of permit handover. Then incoming requested workers must attach their locks and tags. So, in the case where these people they were not part of the JSA, they have to prepare their own JSA and do what? Request for permits. That is a requirement. So, because you cannot sign on a permit without having a what? A JSA. No. So you must be part of the JSA. So it's either they are taken through the JSA, the requirements, we agree, we sign on, or we prepare our own JSA and sign and request for new permits. That is on the handover. So it's very important also remember that you have to remove your lock at the end of the task or whenever you are moved for another task. That's all. So any questions?